300 plus years of legacy and learnings
Yeah.
in jewelry business. If you had to give three top suggestions to these budding entrepreneurs
Yeah.
in especially the lab grown diamond space,
Yeah.
what would be those three top suggestions?
So I think the first one is.
Tell us more about this conversation with Mr. Ratan Tata and
One of the key things that I realized is in India back then, a lot of jewelry was being undercarated. So Tanishq had this perception of being expensive.
For someone holding a traditional portfolio, what role or what percentage or what allocation do you think, as an expert in this field, should be done to jewelry, and what percentage should be to gemstones? Any view on that?
Yes, I'll start with gold and then maybe I'll transition to gemstones right after. So gold is quite interesting. It's outperformed the.
In my head, there's a movie called Blood Diamond that's playing in, right?
Sure.
I can imagine that scene wherein there are diamonds being mined. So
Yeah.
any such interesting wild backstory you've had?
You'll have less than 100 people in the town. A lot of people will sleep where they dig.
2% of engagement ring diamonds sold were lab grown. This is according to Angara CEO Ankur Daga.
Founder and CEO Ankur Daga.
Let's bring in Ankur Daga here.
Ankur Daga and Aditi Daga.
Ankur Daga.
We are now joined by Ankur Daga. He's co-founder at Angara.
From the royal jewelry traditions of Jaipur to customers across the world, building a global jewelry brand is a lot more complex than it sounds. Today we have with us Mr. Ankur Daga, our special guest and co-founder of Angara. He has spent 2 decades doing exactly that, sourcing gemstones, building a made-to-order jewelry, and navigating everything from supply chain shocks to changing luxury trends. Today, we are diving deep into the business of gemstones, the future of personalized jewelry, and whether precious stones are quietly becoming an alternative asset class. Ankur, it's great to have you with us. Looking forward to this beautiful conversation with you. First things first, very warm welcome, Ankur. I know you're coming from a part of the world which is now sort of has all the attention thanks to Mr. Trump. We would want to hear how's been your journey like from Jaipur to building one of the most loved jewelry brand across the globe, Angara. How's been the journey for you?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Super excited for this conversation. So I was born in Jaipur, grew up in Los Angeles, then did my college and so forth in the East Coast. But I used to come back to Jaipur every summer, so very fond of the city. Jaipur happens to be the gemstone capital of the world. In that respect, I grew up in a jewelry family. And so from the age of 5, I've been going to the office most weekends. And I've kind of seen that intimately. Never thought I would enter the jewelry industry growing up. It wasn't for me, per se. Coincidentally, in college, I happened to run into Ratan Tata, and that started my journey. So he was speaking at our college. And then after that, I chased him down at the train station. I went up to him and I said, I'm a huge fan of the Tatas. And he happened not to have any security around and so forth. He was going from Philadelphia to New York. And I said, I just want to let you know that I fall sick because of you. And he said, well, what do you mean? So I said, when I land into Delhi and I go to Jaipur, I'm usually behind a Tata truck. And the exhaust is coming straight into our car typically. And then I'm coughing. And so by the time I'm in Jaipur, I'm sick. And so if you could just put the exhaust vertically, that would be a huge help. And then we just got to chatting, and he asked for my address and phone number, and he sent me a letter a month later saying, hey, next time you're in India, reach out. So I met him at the Tata Sons office.
Bombay House.
Bombay House, exactly. Dilnaz arranged it and so forth, and spoke for 3 hours. He sent me to Tanishq. So that was my first experience with organized retail. And India, organized retail was relatively new back then. That's the first time I saw opportunity in the jewelry industry, ironically. Completely removed from the family business and all of that. And then fast forward, I joined McKinsey after college. My longest project was serving Tanishq in Bangalore. And at that time, it was kind of a turnaround story. So I got to see all aspects of the jewelry business, from the supply chain manufacturing side all the way through retail. Realized there's a lot of opportunity there. And so when I went to business school, I was very clear that I wanted to start a jewelry company thereafter. Interestingly, my wife whose family is also in the jewelry business. Theirs is a 300-year plus history
Wow.
out of Jaipur. So for her, it's really in her blood. And she loves jewelry with a passion. So for us, it was like, can we start something together? And that's how the journey effectively began.
Wow. So you're carrying forward the legacy, on both sides, on your in-law side, on your
Yeah.
parents' side. But very interesting to hear that Tanishq was, in a way, the inspiration for you to get into the jewelry business.
Yeah.
Tell us more about this conversation with Mr. Ratan Tata and Tanishq. So
Yeah.
when you went to Tanishq, of course, it was this would have been the years wherein Tanishq was already a known name.
Yes.
What
yeah.
were the 3-4 top things that you feel that actually helped you, sharpen your intent that yes, this is it and I want to go for it?
Yeah, I think for the India market specifically, 99% of it back then was unorganized, mostly family jewelers. One of the key things that I realized is in India back then, a lot of jewelry was being undercarated. So Tanishq had this perception of being expensive back then. And the reality of the situation was they were the honest jeweler, and that's why they were perceived to be expensive. So a lot of jewelers, well-known jewelers across India, when they advertised 22 karat gold, it ended up being anywhere from 14 to 20 carats.
True.
And that's where the margin was coming. So Tanishq at that time installed these carat meters in stores where you can bring jewelry, show it, test it, and then get the true reading. And I think that really changed public perception. But for me, I think the big thing was that can you really build a 10,000 crore plus brand in jewelry in India? And the answer, in my mind at least, was intuitively yes, because I've seen it in the US, and there's no reason it couldn't happen here. The key question in my mind is family jewelers tend to have long relationships over generations. In an organized fashion, that's very difficult to do. So could that be overcome? And based on the US experience, it felt like a yes. But the Indian consumer and the US consumer are relatively different. And I think obviously over time, they've proven out that that case is absolutely possible. It happens to now be the most valuable jewelry brand in the world by far.
Very interesting. So tell us more about, Tanishq as an inspiration. As far as I understand, Tanishq,
Yeah.
it's the love for the body, and hence, the jewelry plays a very critical role. What's
Yeah.
the story behind Angara? Angara as a name.
Yeah, so for us, Angara is a fire within, so Sanskrit roots. And the idea is coal and diamonds are both the same atom, which is carbon. And the idea is that the diamond really sparkles. That's what adds to the brilliance of life in general. And for us, the gemstone or the diamond has always been the hero. And everything else just surrounds itself with that as a centerpiece. So that was part of the thought process behind Angara as a name. Even though we weren't serving the Indian diaspora, it felt very apt for this category.
But Angara is a far contemporary of a brand, from the positioning, from the look and feel. How do
Yeah.
you still say feel rooted to the Indianness or the cultural heritage?
Yeah, so backstory to this is when we started the company, we had really two objectives. One is if you looked at how jewelry was bought 300 years ago, it was deeply personal, deeply emotional. The jeweler would go to, in that case, it was business people or aristocrats and say, what are you dreaming of? The customer would describe what they want. It could be a 10 karat cashmere sapphire, for example, for a pendant. The jeweler would sketch the piece, show it, get approval, then spend 6 months sourcing it, creating it, and then presenting it. So it was deeply personal, deeply meaningful. And we felt that's exactly how jewelry should be sold. And fast forward to when we started the company in 2005, most of jewelry in the US was the store has what it's carrying and the salesperson pushes what they have. And we felt that a lot of the essence, a lot of the beauty of jewelry was lost in that. And ironically, we thought, can we use technology to bring the industry back to its roots? And I'll kind of go into exactly how we thought about it back then. So that was part one. Part two is 300 years ago, color stones were the center of the jewelry industry. So the majority of stones that were sold were emerald, ruby, sapphire, as well as a myriad of others. And diamonds were 1 out of 40 gemstones. Then in 1947, De Beers came out with A Diamond is Forever. All of a sudden, with A Diamond is Forever plus a concept of 2 months salary and an engagement ring and the marketing push behind it, diamonds became 90% plus of what was sold as studded jewelry. In our minds, is that a marketing story or is that what the consumer actually wants? And we felt that we owe it to ourselves to present to the world all of the other gemstones that are out there that have existed for centuries. And whether a customer buys diamonds or color stones, we're agnostic to that. But we just wanted to present that as an option. And that was the second part of how we thought about it. So that's kind of, in a sense, what we wanted to achieve. And we knew that would be a 50-year goal. De Beers established diamonds over 75 years, so the fastest we could do it is probably 50 years. So that was kind of how we were thinking about it back then. When I mentioned we use technology to bring the industry back to its roots, the idea is we wanted to offer everything custom. So everything is made to order. And so, for example, if you want something in silver, yellow gold, white gold, rose gold, platinum, 14 karat, 18 karat, we offer all of those permutations. Everything is made, and you could have it in a half a carat, 1 carat, 2 carat, 3 carat, in a quality that's relatively mall jeweler lower end, all the way up to Tiffany plus type quality. And so the idea is if you like a design, let's say a 3-stone ring, we don't know if you want to spend $500 or $50,000 in the US context, but we want to be able to serve both audiences, which is relatively unique. The difference versus 300 years ago is we said, can we use technology with vertical integration, own the entire supply chain, create that piece from scratch, made to order in the customer's ring size within 24 hours. And then ship. So the customer gets it in 72 to 96 hours, but it's a completely bespoke custom piece. And so that was the intent from the onset.
That's beautiful. I think it's jewelry as a piece of art, right? I mean, you would take some amount of time to source it, then sort of make it, and then present.
Yeah.
I like how you're taking that whole personalized space. But tell me, these days I see a lot of fascination towards artificial diamonds, or some things which might not be as precious as it used to be.
Yeah.
What's your take on that? Is that a disruption happening?
Yeah, so just for some context, so lab-grown diamonds have been around since the 1950s. So GE started that for industrial manufacturing since then. What was really the catalyst or the pivot was in 2018, the Federal Trade Commission in the US declared that a lab-grown diamond is a diamond. You just have to disclose because it is chemically, physically, optically identical to the natural diamond. One, of course, is made over weeks, the other billions of years. But effectively, to the naked eye, it's the same thing. To any jeweler in the world with even a 30x loop, it's identical. So it's the same good, it's just not scarce, and therefore less value because of that. We are not opposed at all to lab-grown. I think it democratizes jewelry in a lot of respects. So, for example, in the US, the average engagement ring today is $5,000. But the dream most women have is to get a 2 to 3 carat diamond in a platinum setting. That historically used to be $25,000 to $50,000, so out of reach for many. All of a sudden, because of lab grown, it's within reach for a majority of the population. So that we're super excited about. Will it retain value? Lab grown? No. Lab grown diamonds will not. But if you're looking at it as adornment, I think it's equally strong. So we sell both. We're agnostic as to whether people buy natural or lab, both for color gemstones and for diamonds. We just want to be able to get the customer what they like.
Interesting. So you just said that the average engagement ring is roughly about $5,000 in the US.
Correct.
Which boils down to roughly about 4 lakh rupees in Indian rupees.
4.5-ish, yes.
But that number in India
Yeah.
would be, I suppose, far lesser, right? Maybe 1/4 of it, a lakh and a half.
Yeah.
The average engagement ring.
1 to 2 lakhs is kind of the sweet spot.
The sweet spot in India.
Yeah.
But this is with original diamonds, right?
Well, you mean natural?
Natural diamonds.
Yes,
Yeah?
exactly.
So it's not about. But when you say that the lab grown diamonds are now stepping in, the price range that I have in my mind is from certain thousands, like maybe 5 to 10,000. Is that correct, or in that also there is grading, like in carats, etc.?
So there is grading. So now you can get a 2 carat or 3 carat diamond for lab grown in 1 lakh to 2 lakhs with the mounting. Okay. Historically, that wouldn't have been possible. So just kind of contrast the US and India market. It might be interesting to look at that. So back when the FTC said a lab-grown diamond is a diamond, only 2% of engagement rings had a lab-grown center. This year, it's over 60%, 61% in the last quarter. Wow. Massive change. So the majority of centers are lab-grown. I think that the India market over the next decade will very much go in the same direction. In the US, I think 80% of engagement rings effectively by 2030 will be lab grown. In India, it will be over half for sure, and maybe as high as 80% by then.
I think it's a fairly, I would say, green pasture right now, because the lab grown diamond space doesn't have as such a brand. It's still a commodity, right?
Yes.
It's a lab grown diamond versus a natural diamond. A natural diamond is a natural diamond. You can go to, specialists like you, and Angara se aap order kar sakte hain.
Yeah.
But for lab grown diamonds, do you think there is big green patch, like maybe people or budding entrepreneurs can get into it to make a brand of it?
So, what's really interesting is if I look at the Indian startup ecosystem, there's so much dynamism in there. So there's 50 to 100 funded lab-grown diamond startups in India now.
Oh.
So it's a massive category, and the likes of Zudio and so forth are also in it. So I think that certainly will be very compelling for the customer to see, and I think competition will be fierce in that. Now, how do you stand out in a market? I think that's where the challenge becomes. If you have 50 startups chasing one idea, that becomes a challenge. In contrast, in the US, there's basically 3 companies that are focused on lab grown. So very much less competition there. They have more scale. But I think it's really exciting what's happening in India specifically there.
So I think your legacy or your learnings, would be what? 300 years of your family legacy and then 20 years now.
Correct.
So roughly about, I don't know, 300 plus years of legacy and learnings
Yeah.
in jewelry business. If you had to give 3 top suggestions to these budding entrepreneurs in especially the lab grown diamond space, what would be those 3 top suggestions?
So I think the first one is find product market fit. Make sure you have a product that the customer loves. That's how you differentiate yourself. Second is, I think relationship building is extremely important. If you start off as an engagement ring supplier, it's critical to then sell diamond studs, diamond solitaire pendants, and so forth, and establish that relationship over time. That's where really the power of the brand comes in. And third is try to find a niche. So, when everybody is chasing the same target, typically, e-commerce is winner takes all or a duopoly. And in this case, 50 will be reduced perhaps to 2 or 3. So what's the niche that you could uniquely be the best in the world at? The faster you figure that out and the faster the customer validates that, the more chances of success there are.
Interesting. I've always been very fascinated that, you also mentioned that the natural diamonds are scarce. They take millions of years to age. So can you take us through the lifetime or the lifeline of a gemstone from the moment it's mined to finally it's finished and on a beautiful finger? How much time and what process does it go through?
It's a fascinating journey. So I'll start with color stones. So, for example, for emeralds, we source from Zambia and from Colombia and some from Brazil as well. So we would travel to those locations, buy rough in the form of basically rocks. Take that back to Jaipur, cut and polish that material. So now we're already in a couple of countries. That rough that's cut and polished, typically a stone can take anywhere from an hour to 24 hours to cut and polish. There's a lot of art in that, so people have been doing this for generations, and most of the karigars have been doing this for a very long time. They can eyeball a stone and say, okay, a round is a way to maximize the beauty, the brilliance of this gemstone. Cut and polish that. Now that gemstone will then get exported. For example, for us, our factories are in Thailand, in Los Angeles, and in Jaipur, so depending on where that is. So we would export to the office that manufactures. But for others, they would go to wholesalers all across the world. Let's take New York as an example. From that place, they will then be manufactured into jewelry. And then sold anywhere in retailers in the US or Europe or anywhere else. So now they've gone through 3 continents. That process has taken roughly 6 months end to end to get to the retail shelves. And it's also gone through 5 to 7 hands in that process. And each gemstone is different. So, for example, for sapphires, it might be Madagascar or Sri Lanka. For rubies, it would be Mozambique. And for opals, it would be Australia or Ethiopia. So each stone is sourced from a completely different part of the world.
So each stone has, in a way, a different backstory.
That's right.
Or a legacy of itself.
That's right. And different supply chains, demand supply dynamics, and so forth. Yes. Yeah.
Any behind the scenes story you want to share, which was maybe in the wild, because of
Yeah.
whatever you are telling, I'm in my head there's a movie called Blood Diamond that's playing in, right? And
Sure,
I can
sure.
imagine that scene wherein there are diamonds being mined. So
Yeah.
any such interesting wild backstory you've had while on your trips to any of these countries?
Yeah, so I'll start with Australia. So what's fascinating there, and just as an aside, blood diamonds as a concept, it's extremely rare nowadays. So the Kimberley process is there, which prevents things like that from happening. So almost all of the supply chain is very ethically sourced, and certainly that's what we do, and most others do as well now. Starting with opals in Australia, so the best opals in the world come from Australia, and they come from Western Australia. So in that, there's these small towns of basically 100 miners that exist where this has been happening for generations, but the newer generations don't want to mine anymore. So most of that population is shifting to Sydney or Melbourne or wherever else. So these towns are getting smaller and smaller. But when you travel to Western Australia, for example, Cooper Paddy is one such town, you'll have less than 100 people in the town. A lot of people will sleep where they dig, literally, and they'll have guns with them just in case somebody tries to steal their rough. And so it's very difficult to imagine that type of world, but that's essentially where opals come from. So you have to go there, you source opals which are in the form of effectively rocks, export that, and that might be cut in Jaipur, for example, in our case, or in Hong Kong or China. They'll be shaped and then sold. But the customer that's wearing that ring would scarcely realize that was actually in some village in Australia that this actually came from.
Wow. Did you actually think anytime that would it be, interesting to share this backstory with any customer? Have you done that?
So we're starting to now.
Yeah?
And it's amazing how much people are enjoying this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there's an element of surprise, and the attachment to the gemstone increases once you know where it
Where
actually
is it coming from?
comes from. Absolutely. Yeah.
Tell us, when was the first time when one of the costliest gemstone was sold on Angara?
Yeah.
And I'm sure you might not want to share the name of the customer. That's okay.
Sure.
But we want to understand what was the value and how did you feel about it?
So the most expensive piece that we've sold is roughly 2 crores.
2 crore Indian rupees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And online, the customer did not even call us. They just placed the order online. We had the stone in stock. We built the piece, shipped it out within 2 days. And that customer has been a repeat customer since then, buying many things thereafter.
Wow.
So it's amazing how large transactions can be where there's no human involvement. A lot of that, I think, is dictated by being very transparent on the website. GI certificates help as well. And customers at that level generally know exactly what they're looking for. So the sales process is relatively easy.
Like you said, this would also have been a personalization, right? This 2 crore order, I'm sure it was made to order. Do you
Yeah.
think that personalization is actually the future of luxury across?
I think so, yeah. So I think ironically we go back to 300 years ago. That's how it used to be then. Everything was bespoke. Everything was custom. And I think increasingly, even with Gen Z today, the story matters so much in the entire process.
True.
So in the US today, 88% of engagement rings today that are sold are customized. And that's very much, and that used to not be the case 15 years ago. So we're already moving in that direction. The Holy Grail, and I think what we're working towards, is this idea of completely bespoke, where we're leveraging AI for this. So for example, let's say you and your fiance or soon-to-be fiance met at the Eiffel Tower. So you would be able to tell the AI bot that, hey, we met in the Eiffel Tower. I would like to have some parts of that in the ring. And the ring will be created in real time, digitally rendered, priced out with those elements. And you can say, no, I want to make it a little bit smaller or larger, or this motif, the very top of the tower is what I want to incorporate. And because, I was born in September, I would like this to have sapphire side stones, things like that. Or my fiancé-to-be was born in September, and you can create a completely custom piece that's uniquely your story made from scratch, leveraging AI, leveraging e-commerce, leveraging the supply chain. And I think that is really how jewelry should be sold.
Yeah, very interesting. I think, this whole AI, I would say, massive adoption that's happening. And
Yeah.
I don't think it's even age, to do with age. I mean, today people are adopting AI at every age level, all geographies. I
Yeah.
think very interestingly, the power is shifting to the consumer so much
Yep.
that it's all about what I want,
Yeah.
how I want, what shape do I want. So I think very interestingly, what you said is that it could be as customized as the place where you went for your honeymoon or first time you met, or
Yeah.
maybe we can't even think, like, it could be anything. But tell me, how do you see this also as a big challenge? Or you can say that no, we don't see this as a challenge but an opportunity.
Yeah.
Because AI is somewhere
Yeah.
also in a way dehumanizes a lot of the process.
Yeah.
AI has that perception that it's all over to machines now.
Yeah.
And maybe it's giving you the right output, what you need, but
Yeah.
it's culling out all the emotion.
Yeah.
So how
Yeah.
do you still think that with the vision that you have,
Yeah.
Angara to be the most trusted, customized, bespoke, there's a lot of human emotion into it. Don't
Yeah.
you think it's a challenge?
So it's as much as challenge as an opportunity. We're taking it certainly as an opportunity. I think if we can take AI, the best of what it offers, and humanize the process further, that's the win for us. So, for example, this bespoke design of the Eiffel Tower related engagement ring, that can really only be done through AI because you could digitally render the product in real time, show it. For us, we're very careful with this balance. So, all of the education that we're focusing on, all of that is human with GIA certified people within the team, people that have been ex-teachers at the GIA talking about different gemstones, what makes them special. That's all live content. And we're using AI specifically for the use case of how do we make the customer experience better. Through that lens, I think it actually humanizes the entire journey more. But certainly, if we did not take that approach, we could certainly have gone in a direction that all of a sudden it looks like an AI site, AI experience, and that loses a lot of what makes jewelry special, certainly.
Very interesting. So coming to now your India growth story. I mean, the last
Yeah.
we spoke, you told me that you're now finally expanding to India.
Yeah.
How does the Indian jewelry customer,
Yeah.
differ from the US or global consumers in your head, and how are you decoding it?
Yeah, so just for some context, so the overall jewelry industry worldwide is $370 billion. Of that, India and the US are the two largest in the world, roughly $85 billion each. This year, India will actually be the largest jewelry consuming market in the world. There's a lot of similarities, there's a lot of differences as well. So I'll start with some of the differences. So, for example, only 2% of India's jewelry market is a gemstone consuming market. 90% is gold jewelry. In comparison, that's only 50% in the US.
Oh.
And diamonds are roughly 8 to 10% in India. That's roughly half the market in the US.
Wow.
So pretty dramatic structural differences there. The US consumer and the Indian consumer are also very different in the sense of the Indian consumer primarily looks at jewelry as an investment. And so the breakdown of, okay, what's the gold weight, what's the labor cost, that doesn't necessarily exist in the US, even though the US consumer in the back of their minds also, this is an investment for the long term as well. With Gen Z in India, I think that is shifting a little bit, where much more of the importance is placed on design and provenance and story than ever has before, but the primary lens is still an investment lens.
How India has always seen jewelry as an investment, but now
Yeah.
with the younger generation of also looking at designs and a personalization in it.
Yeah.
But tell me, these two things, don't they contradict? Number one, number two, how at Angara you're able to retain that Indian context now with the launch in India? Like, how will you ensure that it's cutting ice with both the school of thoughts, investment
Yeah.
also and personalization also?
Yeah. So I think jewelry in many ways is a holy grail. It appreciates really well, and you get to wear it too and enjoy it in that process. So interestingly, this concept, so when engagement rings were first launched, the idea of spending 2 months' salary or 3 months' salary on an engagement ring, part of the idea was if something ever happens, then at least you have the ring that you can sell. So that was deeply embedded in the US culture also. In the India culture, hopefully nobody ever has to sell their jewelry, but the fact that you can is really important. So I'll kind of go back to a story where my eldest Taiji, my dad is one of 10 brothers. So eldest Taiji, when the family fell on hard times, she had to sell her jewelry in order to finance life. And my dad still cries every time he remembers that story. So hopefully it never happens to anyone, but the fact that you can is really valuable. So I think that's deeply ingrained in our culture, and rightly so. In terms of that holy grail on the investment side, I'll just talk about a little bit of what's happened over the last decade. So the Sensex is up roughly 13% CAGR year on year. So over the last decade, the Sensex is up roughly 13% year on year. The gold is up anywhere from 18.5 to 18.8%, depending on how you look at it in rupee terms, every year. And then gemstones are up anywhere from 20 to 25% year on year. So a lot of cases, 5 to 8 times appreciation. Historically, the challenge with gemstones has been that they're very difficult to resell. So one of the things Angara is working on is creating basically a secondary market for gemstones where we would be able to repurchase back at the appreciated rates for the investment grade gemstones that we sell to make that market so that it is actually a liquid, tradable asset. If you ever decide that you want to part ways with the stone, that would be possible to do.
So you're planning that as your selling proposition in India?
That's right. Yeah. So starting June, and this would be the first place we tried it around the world. But the idea is certainly as gold is, gemstones should also have a value that's ascribed. It shouldn't be very difficult to resell if you ever need to do so.
But tell me, now that you're planning to launch in India this June, I mean, of course, there are geopolitical tensions all around, and I'm sure supply chains would have also been facing the heat.
Yeah.
What effect does that? What does that have on businesses like yours? Of course, they are. I mean, gold and precious metals are an important part of the overall economy across the globe.
Yeah.
That is your raw material, right? But apart
Sure.
from that, supply chains are being disrupted. How does that impact you?
So it affects all jewelers, us a little bit less, and I'll kind of explain why that is the case. But just as a couple of data points, so Dubai is responsible for exporting 70% of rough into India for diamonds, and right now the airport is shut. And so that will certainly create a ripple effect. Now, there's inventory already existing in Surat and Bombay that can be leveraged for the time being. There's a lot of inventory, for us, example, in Thailand and in the US as well. So for the time period right now, we're relatively okay. But if the war does prolong, there will certainly be disruptions in the supply chain there. The reason it affects us a little bit less than others is because the majority of what we sell is colored gemstones. And those can be coming from Africa or could be coming from parts of Asia, depending on the stone, or Australia. And then they will go to Bangkok or Jaipur, be cut and polished. And then our manufacturing facilities are in Thailand or India or Los Angeles. So we're relatively insulated from what's happening in the Middle East. That being said, if the war spreads much further, then we will be affected heavily as well. If the war ends relatively quickly, I think the global supply chain will be okay. If it extends, a month to 2 months onwards, then we'll certainly see disruptions happen.
Apart from the inventory issues that you said, does such geopolitical tensions, gold and silver, of course, are much impacted.
Yeah.
But do gemstones also face that volatility?
Not necessarily, especially at the high end. So if you look at, for example, what's happened over, let's say, the leading auction houses worldwide over the last 5 years, gemstones have been the true outperformers, trading at 2 to 3 times high multiples for Sotheby's, Christie's, Bonhams, Phillips, and major auction houses. That end of the market is generally less prone to economic disruptions because of things like war. On the margins, I could see that being affected. For, I think, the middle segment and the lower segment, yes, that is going to be more affected by war. It creates doubt, it creates fear, which then leads to less jewelry consumption. Jewelry is the ultimate choice. You don't have to have it. It's not a necessity. So in periods of recession, certainly the lower ends of the market get impacted pretty effectively.
Interesting. So, with all this conversation, I see that gemstones as a category is sort of coming across to be developing as one of the bigger asset classes now, right? Just like gold, silver, and people are wanting to buy voluntarily.
Yeah.
For someone holding a traditional portfolio, what role or what percentage or what allocation do you think, as an expert in this field, should be done to jewelry, and what percentage should be to gemstones? Any view on that?
Yes, I'll start with gold, and then maybe I'll transition to gemstones right after. So gold is quite interesting. It's outperformed the S&P and the Sensex over the last 10 years, as we discussed. But interestingly, if you ran a 30-year correlation, there's very little. It's like a regression of like 0.04, where there's no correlation between the stock market and gold. So in terms of a diversified portfolio, I think it's important to have both. Hard assets are equally important. So you could have a portfolio of, let's say, equities, real estate, gold, gemstones. I think in terms of what percentage of each, it depends on your time horizon. The longer the time horizon, I think the more you would index towards physical assets in general. So from that perspective, I think gold is a great bet. Gemstones are increasingly a great bet, and they've proven to be so. In terms of a percentage allocation, somewhere in the single digits may be feasible for most. I think that hedges against equities and everything else that are relatively more subject to daily volatility. You won't see that necessarily in gold or gemstones.
But especially in turbulent times like these, right? We see gold also behaving a little too volatile.
Yeah.
So is silver.
Yeah.
And a lot of panic anxieties around, right? And especially in the equities, we are seeing a sell-off, right?
Yep.
A lot of people who would have purchased maybe a couple of months back, just to make some quick bucks, they are now exiting the market, and we call it in technical terms as panic selling. Do you also see such behavior in the jewelry category?
No. So gold has held pretty solid. We're still at roughly $5,000 an ounce, which was the case 2 months ago also. So historically, people have bought gold as a flight to safety. So in times of war, that's very much a part of why you would buy gold. It's also an inflation hedge. And inflation is likely to rise now. So certainly that helps as well. It's also a hedge against geopolitical tension, economic tension, which we're seeing more and more of. So the reasons why gold has gone up so much over the last couple of years, those have not gone away. Can we see a near-term correction? Absolutely. But over the long term, the dynamics that have led to appreciation of gold will continue and maybe even accelerate.
So if an investor today wants to, say, take a position in metals and gemstones, what would be your recommendation?
I think depending on the risk appetite and portfolio construction of the investor, I think certainly between gold and gemstones, 10 to 20% of an overall asset portfolio, it makes sense. And probably more towards gold and gemstones just because it's more liquid.
So it can be sort of as a safe haven still, right?
Yeah.
So you still see, headroom for growth in the near future for the metals to go up?
Near future is hard to comment because they've gone up so much. But if I were to forecast out a decade to 2 decades, which is, I think, the right way to look at something like gold or gemstones, you want longer time horizons for holding them. They're not something you want to trade daily, ideally. I think they will do just fine.
So metals, you're saying for a long-term perspective, if we were to have a position or a vision, then they're perfectly fine. We're in safe hands. Any view on the market conditions now, like the volatility of the stocks is equally being reflected in metals?
Yeah.
What's your view on this? Do you see this happening for how much time more, or can investors take a breath of sigh now?
I think a lot of it depends with what happens with the war. If we see further disruptions in the oil market, that will certainly be an issue. But just as an interesting aside, so there's only 2 times in history where gold has gone up the way it has gone up over the last 2 years. So both happened in 1970s. So Richard Nixon took the U.S. off the gold standard in 73, 74. That's when you saw rapid appreciation. Right after that, the Iran Revolution happened in 78, 79, when gold went up meteorically as well. So disruptions like this are generally what cause this type of appreciation. Going forward, we hope we don't see anything like this in the near term. But gold should rise over the longer duration as a result.
But is it also to do with what do we call as the cycles of market? Because we've seen that after pandemic, especially, a lot of not so great things happened, including the pandemic itself. We saw, Russia, Ukraine. We saw now Iran, US. So a lot of these tensions, when sort of start to snowball,
Yep.
the general perception is that how do you be inclined towards more safer asset classes.
Yes,
But
yeah.
do you think that this perception will still have a snowball effect for at least a couple of years? Because a lot of people are very bullish on metals. Hence my
Yeah.
question.
So I think geopolitical volatility, economic volatility, will certainly increase over time, and therefore gold is a perfect play to guard against that. Already January, February, March, you've seen so much happen.
Yep.
And starting with Maduro, then El Mencho, then what's happening in Iran, maybe Cuba thereafter. I just don't see this slowing down. And so geopolitical tension will happen. On the economic side, I think AI is scaring a lot of people. I think it will actually create more employment rather than unemployment overall. But it is scaring a lot of people, and therefore it causes economic uncertainty. And gold is a great thing to buy in cases of economic uncertainty. So from that perspective, it's definitely bullish for gold.
Sure. So can we take that as a affirmative for people who are holding precious metals, at least in current circumstances, to stay put with their positions?
I think you could see a short-term correction very easily just because it shot up so much. But again, if your time horizon is a decade to 2 decades, certainly, I think from my perspective, it's a hold. So I remain a gold bull. I think over the next decade to 2 decades, gold should appreciate. What can happen in the near term is very difficult to predict, just given how much gold has gone up in the recent past. But if the time horizon is long enough, I think, it should certainly do well.
Well, thank you, Ankur. I think that was very, very, very insightful from your journey from Jaipur to being in the US, growing up there, and finally now bringing the brand to India. We're very hopeful that Angara will do equally brilliant in India as well. And I love the fact that how you're thinking to Indianize the brand when it comes to India, get in the Indian culture, the heritage, and the reflection of it as beautifully as it is in the true sense in your brand also. So we wish you all the very best for your journey, and I'm sure these insights would definitely help our viewers and across the globe also.
Thank you for having me. This was an amazing conversation.
Yeah.
Investments in securities market are subject to market risks. Read all the related documents carefully before investing.